This morning we considered some characteristics of light, asking the question, what is light? Tonight we're going to find out what is my place in the light. What is my place? 1 John chapter 1 verse 5 is very clear. He who walks in darkness is not in light, and God is light. There is no darkness in him at all. God is light. And in verse 7, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. The point is, my place in the light is to remain in the light. Orrin and I were talking at lunch that a lesson about light is so practical that people talk about it a lot, and a number of people had some practical things to say about light. And I promised myself I would refer to 1 John 1:7 because the last time Orrin preached, he forgot to use that verse, he said. So I wanted to make sure I put it in there. But the place is, my place in the light is to remain in the light. And so let's think for just a few minutes about my place in the light. One thing I want to think about is there are at least three different types of receptivity concerning light. Three different ways that objects receive light. And I want to think about these in a couple of ways. I hadn't thought about a couple of these before. First of all, opaque. Some receive light, it's called opaque. Now, obviously what that means is it takes in the light and it doesn't let it out. It just stays right there. So if a person or if something receives light and holds on to it and does not let it out, it is called opaque. Turn, if you will, to James chapter 4. James chapter 4. Now, the reason I think this is an important passage is because oftentimes I find myself reading this text and thinking about the alien sinner, the person in the world. Not sure, in fact, I'm pretty sure that's not what he's talking about. Listen to James 4. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss that you may spend it on your pleasures. Adulteresses and adulterers, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Now, for just a minute, maybe this has hit you before, but this text hit me differently. He said, you ask amiss because you want to spend it on your pleasures. He is talking to Christian people whose prayers to God are for the purpose of spending that prayer to meet your own pleasures and desires. Now, how is that possible? And I've tried to think about ways. How is it that we who are of the light therefore have a connection to God who is light, and we can pray to God who is light, and then he says, you ask for things you want to spend on your own pleasures? Could he be talking about the kinds of prayers that we might pray where we want God to answer them our way? Not asking for His will to be done. In fact, being very clear that this is what I want and this is what I expect. Here I am soaking up the light of God, and instead of shining it, I am holding it for myself and offering prayers to God that include things that are helpful only to me. I don't think I've spent much time thinking about that before. And I like that word, spending it. We spend time in prayer. And if the time we spend is given to asking for things that I then can turn around and use for my pleasure without having the desire to shine the light, then I have become an object that is opaque. One who is soaking up the light of God and trying to hold it only for myself. Sort of sounds like the Jews to me, you know? That's what they did. They not only were the blessed of God, they didn't want anybody else to be. They looked down on the Gentiles. They didn't even want to reach out to them. They didn't want to spread God. Maybe we can be that way. Can we as a church be opaque? Do we reap the benefits that God has put into our lives as the light that He gives to us, and then we want to hoard it for ourselves? Are we all about fulfilling our own congregational pleasures to the expense of not shining the light that we've been blessed to have? If so, we are opaque. Think about that. That would be selfish. Let's try another one. We talked about this one this morning, translucent. It brings the light and lets it pass through, but on the way through, it is distorted, like putting a stick in water and noticing the refraction. James chapter 3, right above that passage in verse 17, uses the phrase that is called self-willed. He talks about wisdom, verse 17 of chapter 3. The wisdom from above is pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield. In Titus chapter 1, verse 7, in giving instructions for those men who would be shepherding the church. One of the qualifications is not being self-willed. Here's what I think he's talking about. We could receive the light of God and distort it because we will for ourselves how we're going to pass it on. We decide what the definition of the light is. This morning I referred to Psalm 119, 105. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my pathway. If that is the light, then I don't have the right to decide how or the definition of the light that is going to shine. Those who shepherd the Lord's church cannot be self-willed people. They cannot be men whose leadership is based on what they want. They must be willing to yield. And if we are people who want to have wisdom, which James talks about in chapter 1, if you lack wisdom, ask of God, He gives to all. If we want to be people who are wise, then wisdom from God involves willing to yield. Individually, willing to yield. Ron often reminds us that the greatest challenge in Christianity, submission. willing to yield. One who is not willing to yield is self-willed, defining for himself or herself how I'm going to shine the light, or the definition of the light, or what the light looks like. God says, here is my light. He is light. It can't be my will, it has to be His. The third object, transparent. A transparent object takes in the light and passes it on in exactly the way it was received. Transparency. Look at Philippians chapter 1. Paul was a transparent Christian. Look at verse 19 beginning. For I know this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me to live is Christ, to die is gain. Now that is selfless. The transparent object is selfless. Self is taken out of the way in order to see the light that is supposed to be shining. It occurs to me in thinking about this, if we are to be transformed people, could God be telling us that He wants us to be transformed into being transparent? Now think what the possibilities of that would be. Transformed to be transparent. Because in doing so, the light is shining and it can be seen and it's obvious and it's the same definition. It's the definition of God. And I can see you shining it and you can see me shining it. We are transparent in that we are all on the same page, shining the light that we have received. Not hiding it, not changing it. We're just passing it on. And that is the object that God wants us to be. Transparent with the light that He shines on us. Now let's think, secondly, about my place in the light. My place in that light. First of all, in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verses 15 and 16, in a statement about Jesus, He is called the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Holy Potentate, and, notice, the one who lives in unapproachable light. My place is to approach the unapproachable. Wow. How do you do that? How many times have you been driving down the road at night and you pass a car that has failed to dim its lights? You know, and you're flashing and doing things. Tell them to turn them off. Or I don't know what it is about Richmond, but there's a time in the day when you come down Main Street, you can't see anything. The light, the sun is setting at the end of Main Street. And you can't, if you're driving into town, coming west, you can't see anything. You've been through that, right? You've seen that. And boy, it's hard to see the traffic light. It's hard to see anything. And yet, that's what God tells us to do. Approach the unapproachable. He goes on to say in that passage, no man has ever seen Him. Well, that's true. In His natural state, in His real existence, we've never seen Him, but we approach that unapproachable light. That's a respect thing. That's what that is. We approach because we have respect for its unapproachableness, and yet we come anyway. In fact, the Hebrew writer says to approach the throne of God, because there we can find grace to help in time of need. Approach the unapproachable. My place is to respect that light. Number two, marvel at the marvelous. 1 Peter 2 verse 9, you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a people for his own possession. He has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Marvel at the marvelous. You have been to places when you come to them at night and you marvel at the lights, right? I remember when we took a trip out west at night coming into Las Vegas, because there ain't nothing else. There's the city in the middle of the desert. And when you come in there, man, lights. And it's flashy. It's neat. Marvel. The light of the world is attractive to us. We marvel at it. There's a whole lot of stuff that the world is flashing our way. The passage we referred to this morning, that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light. His ministers do the same thing. We marvel at the lights of this world, but there's only one marvelous light, and it's the light of Jesus. Therefore, my place in the light is not just to respect it, but to appreciate it, to value it, and to prioritize it. Marvel at the light of Jesus, not the lights that this world is putting out. Number three, this is the one that interests me. Be armed with the armor. Romans 13, verse 12. He calls it the armor of light. I've been thinking about that today. Armor of light. Well, first of all, let's say that the middle of the night, there are no lights on in the house, and you hear something. The first thing I do maybe is grab a flashlight so I can see my way, or turn the light on. Now, I got to tell you, if somebody has a gun, that light's not helping me much, right? If the flashlight is big enough that I can beat them over the head, maybe. Or if it's really, really powerful so that I can blind them, maybe. But do you think of light as an armor? I don't. God does. I think the reason may be this, and you can give me some other reasons as you have time. I think armor or light is an armor because if there is light, the darkness can't get in. Not possible. See, light and darkness can't be in the same place at the same time. Impossible. They are mutually exclusive. So what is my best armor? The light of Jesus. If I keep the light of Jesus on me, then the darkness can't get in. So it is a powerful armor. I just don't think I'd ever thought about it that way before. So my place is to use the light. So I respect it, I prioritize it, and then I use it. Now I want to close with our text in Ephesians chapter 5. Because every time you open up text, look at the same one over and over and over. You can still get different points every single time. Okay? Here are three more that if I have armed myself with light, if that's what I've done, if I have had the proper priority and respect to arm myself with light, verse 8, then I can rest in it. Notice the text, verse 8. You are light in the Lord. Light in the Lord. All it took as a kid, when I was afraid in my room, was for my dad to come in and turn on the light. I could rest. It's pretty interesting. When I was a kid, I needed a light to rest. Now that I'm an adult, I want it to be pitch black. Part of that's because I can rest. You know what? If you are armed with the light of the Lord, you can rest in the Lord without any care, without any concern, without any fear. Number two, if you're armed with the Lord, you can rely upon it. He's talking here about walk as children of light. What's a child? A child is a learner. A child is one who is developing. A child is one who is growing. A child is not an adult. And that's what he's saying. In the light, rely on it like a child does parents. Rely on it. But instead, sometimes we want to have our own light. So see, if I arm myself with the light, not only can I rest in it, it calms me, but I can rely on it. I can be confident that whatever is coming. But then finally, I did not even consider this in the text for this morning, but it seems to me that he is saying something because we didn't go on down to verse 13. But go down there with me. Ephesians 5:13, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light. Could he be saying, allow the light of God to reveal what light you have? Light does that. Light reveals. And I think he may be saying, what kind of light do you have? Put it alongside the light of Jesus and let it reveal what light you have. We compare lights. When I went to put lights on my truck, headlights, you got those normal ones. Then you have those that are a little bit brighter. Then you have those blue ones that I see running down the highway, right? You put one next to the other. Or how about in the hardware store when they're trying to show you the difference between this bulb and this LED? And they turn them both on. It's easy to see. I think that's what he's saying. He's saying, let your light be revealed by his light. So what's my place? My place is to respect and prioritize his light in my life, arming myself with it so I can rest in it peaceably, rely on it for the future, and absolutely let it reveal to me who I really am. So therefore, we close with that revelation. Am I a child of light? Do I have the light of Jesus? That's the question. That's what I have to ask. That's what we all have to answer. And furthermore, is this church showing the light of Jesus or the light that we selfishly have devised for ourselves? Interesting questions. We all need to answer. Tonight, his marvelous light is for us. God, who is light, invites us to the light. If you're not a child of his, come live in the light with the people of God, submitting yourself to be baptized, that your sins may be washed away before the Lord. Darkness is removed when light comes in. And if we can help you compare your light to Jesus so that we all, comparing with each other, can encourage each other to be better, can we help you tonight while we stand and sing together?